Hello, everybody. Well, this is Pastor Sunday welcoming you to our daily word. Today I'm here with a good friend of mine that is coming all the way from Nigeria and that is been here several times and really knows what's going on in Ukraine and this ministry. And I think that sharing with him the time with you will really be a blessing to you this week. So this whole week, Pastor John Enelemah is going to be with us. Pastor John, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor.
Now, why do you keep on coming to the Ukraine? Because people might not understand that. What do you see or receive or get in the Ukraine that you think worth coming for, back for?
Well, I remember my first trip to Ukraine in 2006. It was a very transformational experience for me. Something I couldn't really describe in words, but something did happen to me. And what I saw in the Ukraine represented for me a model that God had raised for the body of Christ. A question that was asked me before I left for Ukraine was, what is the church? What is the purpose of the church? And when I came, I began to understand why that God was asking me that question. Because the church that I saw and the impact they were having on society, it's something I'd never seen before. And it helped me to understand more the gospel of the kingdom and what the Bible was all about. And
now, what could you have seen? Can you mention a few of those? We have a whole week. So, what are the things that you think you have seen here that is quite different, or that is total different from what you're used to?
Let me go back and start from something that I often talk about. I think the first thing that hit me when I came was the lifestyle of the man of God himself. I don't know how I saw it, but basically I saw that he was working so hard to be like Jesus. He was the first person, minister of the gospel, that would have that impact on me immediately. I had to ask him, and he said, I work on myself to be like Jesus. Because I was in the office maybe for a week, going to work, meeting him in the office. He would come in early, maybe around 10, work late, most of those days and all that. Busy, very busy schedule. But I saw that he was calm all the time. That got my attention from morning till night, calm. When they asked him, are you never stressed out? Are you always like this? Is this church, with this big church and all that? That's the first thing that I saw. Then the next thing, the next thing, and I will come back to that if he allows me in the course of the week, because the answers he gave me were very insightful. Okay? The next thing I saw was I began to, as I interacted with people, I began to see the impact of the church on society. The impact was so pervasive. It's as if they were everywhere, And yet, so I started asking, what's the population of Ukraine, of Kyiv? They said about 5 million. And I said, so how is it that 20,000 plus people appear to be everywhere in society? Then I understood that each of those people I was seeing was a carrier of the message of the gospel. That caught my attention. What other things did I see? I think when I started talking, he made a comment. Pastor Sunday said that his mission is not that the people are here to help him to fulfill his personal vision, but that he's here to help them discover their own purpose and help them to go and fulfill that purpose. That got my attention big time.
So you mean these things are not regular things you see or hear people practice or do all the time?
In my perspective, not.
But you've not just been in Nigeria. I know you studied in America. You went to Bible school there. You go all over the world to minister. You have minister friends all over the world.
I think that what I will consider to be more regular is that the man of God, the senior pastor of a church, maybe the apostolic leader, has a vision, and that the purpose is to help to fulfill that vision. That's what's more common, that this is the vision and we're trying to fulfill that vision. But
so all the people come to the church to fulfill the vision of the man of God?
Or what could be called the vision of the church, okay, which basically is a central vision. So basically, this is the vision of the church, and we are all working to fulfill this vision of the church. I'd never seen
So people become just instruments?
Become instruments that are being used to fulfill a vision, which is not the vision of those individuals, but instruments to fulfill the vision of the church.
Instead of them becoming Well, I understand what you're saying, but we'll get back to you.
Yes,
We'll definitely continue this talk and of your impression in the Ukraine as we go along the week. So we'll be back tomorrow, dear friends, and Pastor John will have more to tell us about his experience in the Ukraine. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day with Pastor Sunday and Pastor John and Enelemah from Lagos, Nigeria. You said you are telling us about the lessons that you picked from Kiev the last time you came, and you mentioned them just in Iran yesterday. You know, do you want to repeat some of them and really deliberate on them, or you want to give us some new ones before you begin to pick them one by one?
Maybe let me deliberate on some of the ones I've mentioned.
Okay.
I can go to new ones. And, you know, this was an experience I was having, and it wasn't something I was thinking about I was going to be sharing. But I came on a visit, which was supposed to be for a week, that turned to 3 weeks. You know, but I realized that it was a long distance, what you might call advanced education that God was giving to me in leadership. You know, for example, you know, in talking to Pastor Sunday during that period, you know, he said to me, he said 3 things to me that I haven't forgotten. It's been difficult even to keep up with those things in my personal life, but they became models and standards. He said, you know, that I consider it a personal weakness for a person to quarrel with his staff. When I said, why are you not stressed out? Why are you calm? From morning till night. Sometimes you're in the office till 11 p.m., 12 midnight, you're still the same person. He said, you know, I consider it a personal weakness to quarrel with my staff. Now, I didn't understand the full import of that statement, but over time, I realized that even the work I was saying, that the vessel that will carry that work must pay some kind of price. You know, because he made that commitment to work hard on himself, that he can be able to carry a move of God that can be able to impact the whole world and this generation. The other thing he said is that he said, I never leave my home with my wife unhappy. He said, if there's an issue, I take my time because my first priority is to devote my life to God. My next priority is my family, especially my wife, to work with her, to make, in fact, he said that it's my calling to make her happy. And, you know, he said some things and we laughed over it. Well, basically, I'm sure that it's not new to many people, but it's the fact that he lived it, he practiced it. And he said the third thing is ministry, but he said ministry was his hobby, that doing ministry. You know, he has a book written that is titled Pastoring Without Tears, and I saw it in action. You know, I saw the way ministry was being done, and I've never really seen it like that. And so those are the first initial lessons. And then we started talking about, he said that one of the hardest things he had to do in ministry was to raise leaders. And as a pastor, I understood what he was saying, even though he didn't say it in many words. My understanding is that many times in raising leaders, the pastor basically can get so involved with the people that in correcting them and adjusting them, you can destroy who they are. But to raise them intact, to begin to raise them as kings, even before they accept that they are kings, that those leaders eventually rise up to discover their promised land and pursue it and make a difference there, was a big thing. And I think it's something that I would like to even discuss some more, because I saw people that, first of all, they didn't throw their weight around. That's the other thing that was very, very interesting. Everybody was so humble. You wouldn't know who was who. You have to get them to say, oh, I'm the leader of this, I do that. I didn't find people who were basically throwing their weight around. And one of the things I observed was because what? Because it wasn't about titles. It was about responsibility in the kingdom.
Right.
It was the responsibility that they had. They discovered their promised lands, and they accepted responsibility to make a difference. So there was no struggle in the local church for me to become assistant pastor. All those things are called housekeeping ministries.
Or eventual pastor.
You know, those kind of... So
to overthrow the pastor and take his place.
Yeah, so those things had a huge, huge impact on me. And the fact that here was a model that God had used his servant to build. And he was saying that I'm showing you these things because it can be done. So that you don't go the wrong way and think that the way church was done or is being done is the way it's supposed to be done. And something else, you know, that was also obvious is that during the course of that week, I understood why God was asking me, what is the purpose of the church? Because I think that the challenge is that when the purpose of the church has not been known, we've used many other things to occupy ourselves in church.
We have to still talk about that. What's the purpose of the church? But still, you have to finish your experience before we touch on that.
Yes, please.
And we'll continue tomorrow, friends. And you know, it's very interesting listening to Pastor John, because it's probably one of the I think he has to write a book about his experience in Ukraine, because it's probably one of the most thorough student, in the sense that he really studied what is happening in Ukraine, not just coming to receive and to practice, but to really study as a student and document them. So, so you want to listen to him this week. And we'll see you tomorrow. God bless. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day with Pastor Sunday, and my guest today, Pastor John from Lagos, Nigeria. And Pastor John has, been in Ukraine several times, and he's not just visiting and going back. He's actually documenting everything he has seen so far. So, what are the things that you say made Ukraine an attractive place to you, that makes you to keep on coming back?
One of the other things I observed is a strong message that everybody has a purpose and a calling. It was so strong, very strong. And when we talk about people discovering their promised land, understanding what God was calling them to do, I found that, one of the observations I made on that first trip is that here was a church where each person you met actually was either in the process of discovering or in the process of training to take over their promised land.
Or already doing it.
Or they were already doing it, and this basically covered every area and every aspect of society. No part was left untouched. Some people had been successful locally and had gone on missions abroad, had been sent out as apostles to different nations. And I think for me, it had a huge impact on me, in the sense that when you think about it, when you think about the church, what Embassy of God was teaching is that each person has a role to play on behalf of heaven on earth. That life on earth is with a purpose. That you can't live for nothing. You have to live for something. And the church was almost like a platform, a center that was inspiring people, forcing people, compelling people to discover this purpose and go for it. That's one of the things I observed that had a huge impact on me. So that the church itself, then I understood the calling of the church, which we'll talk about again. But basically, one of the primary purposes of the church, the primary purpose, in fact, is to help the members to discover their own individual purpose.
Interesting.
And to
tell us about that.
When you look at the Bible and look at the experience of Jeremiah, when God spoke to him and said, "Before you were in mother's womb, I knew you. Before you came forth, I separated you then as a prophet." It sounds a bit elitist, as if Jeremiah is in a class by himself.
I see.
So it's good to say, well, he's a prophet to the nations. Maybe that's why. And then, but when you look at Paul's experience, when he said, when he pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, then he now said, but that's an ex-criminal. But I saw it demonstrated in Ukraine. I saw that I didn't find believers who were just floating around. In fact, listening to Pastor Sunday on tape, listen to him, because I wrote a lot of questions then, and I still have my list, interestingly enough. I found out that there was a time that people were coming to church so much that they had to stop all the things about all the adverts and TV program,
publicity.
For publicity and so on and so forth. And the thing is that he said that his goal in life is to kick out his members to society. The goal of the average pastor is to grow his church. But then here was a pastor who was saying that his goal was to kick his people out of the church to go there and do the kingdom. And for them to do that, they had to discover their own individual purpose. So that's what I observed, and I thought that was...
And that purpose doesn't mean to be a pastor in the church or an evangelist or a teacher or something.
The purpose here covers all these important or 7 spheres of society. No, basically, it didn't... In fact, they had what you might call more of social pastors.
Yeah. The
truth is that the calling here was, if you were a doctor and you say God was calling you to the world of medicine, go and possess it for God. Yes. And something else I observed was that there were things people did to make money to fund these callings. There were things they did to just raise enough money to fund their passions and their callings. That's right. So that people, I didn't find people who were making money just for the sake of money. Yes. It's either they were busy doing this thing or they were doing other things. And the callings covered every aspect of society. Those who were working with young people, they saw it as a calling, and they saw that as their platform. Those who were working with adults, those who were dealing with drug addicts, who were ex-drug addicts, that's a different subject altogether. But those who were ex-drug addicts, who were working with the drug addicts themselves, saw it as a calling. So that I could then understand why they were able to invade society, because there were no aspects of society that were being left untouched. And interestingly enough, Pastor Sunday said that most things that the people were doing, he wasn't even aware of them. He was basically inspiring them. He said it took a long time to teach on purpose. He thought perhaps at some point over a year, just teaching on purpose, so that people were coming up with different things. There were even issues in society people discovered. He said they didn't even know those things existed, and they built ministries around them and built podiums or pulpits or platforms around them, and they were working with society. Some people were dealing with anti-corruption. I remember one of the sisters who didn't finish high school, who went back to college, wrote a curriculum, and what's interesting about this is that these purposes, once discovered, were presented in a way that it was even difficult for society to reject it. They were I think the phrase that came to me then was that they were resolving societal problems.
That's right.
They were resolving issues in society. They were resolving them, and they weren't using language that society hated. They were using the language of society, so that society accepted them, even though they were driven by the values of the kingdom, and the impact was very visible.
Amazing. You say, that's why I say about Pastor John. He has studied what's going on here, and he can make a beautiful presentation to anybody. So I'm so happy he's with us this week, and we will have him tomorrow again. God bless you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day with Pastor Sunday and Pastor John. And Pastor John has been telling us about his experience in the Ukraine and what he feels has made him to keep on coming back to the Ukraine. You mentioned about is it the definition? What was the thing you were talking about the question God asked you? What is the purpose of
What
the
is
church?
the purpose of a church? And that's the question I left Nigeria with on that trip. And I didn't understand the significance of that question until I arrived in the Ukraine and I saw the embassy of God Church. Then I understood where God was heading to. What is the purpose of a church? Coming to Ukraine in 2006 helped me to understand the purpose of a church. The church is a breeding ground for deliverers.
What does that mean?
It simply means that it's the answer to all of societal problems. The church raises people that can resolve every issue in society. When the Bible says we are the light and salt of the earth, what it simply means is that the members of the church, when they are well trained and equipped, there is no problem in their society they cannot solve.
Brilliant.
And that's why they actually exist. So that as many problems as exist in society, God can raise many people. The church is a platform that raises the men and women that can go into every nook and cranny of society and resolve all the problems of society. So that it becomes a breeding ground for deliverers, because each member of the church, potentially, if well equipped, is a deliverer to a particular aspect of society. And it's through their lives and obedience that God actually writes into that aspect of society. And another way to look at it is a training ground, an equipping ground for believers, in the sense that I came to understand that a pastor's primary, and that's what Pastor Sunday was demonstrating, was to equip the saints to be able to go into society and represent God well, to equip them. And the equipping can be initial for some. Some people are called to the world of politics, for example. He gives them enough knowledge of God that once they understand that calling and they decide to go into the world of politics, the next thing he tells them is, once you find your promised ground, you must become very research-minded and research-oriented. Yeah. You must become an expert in that field, an authority. It's not just speaking by faith. You have to acquire knowledge. You have to become somebody that can be considered an expert in your area of calling. It's a lot of hard work. I mean, I met people who were in their 60s who were going back to school to study. It gave me a new sense, and I mean, there's a point I want to remember here, but I hope I don't, personally transfer it. I want to come back there. But basically, now I found out why people were going to school. The age was immaterial. In fact, it helped me to understand the purpose of education. Because before then, the way education, where I was coming from, is as if you go to school to acquire degrees. In my own home, my parents said they wanted 2 medical doctors. So we had a senior brother, a doctor, my immediate elder brother is a doctor. But then I understood that the purpose of education was to equip a person to fulfill their destiny in God. You pursue education, not for the degree, but to acquire knowledge, to equip you to make a difference in that aspect of society.
Brilliant.
And the other thing that I found amazing, I don't want to forget this part, is the way people testified about their past. Here was a church where people stood up regularly and unashamedly to say, I'm an ex-prostitute. They don't even use the word ex. They said, I used to be a prostitute. And I wondered, what was the difference? Why don't we have, in church, at least the church I pastor, people are ashamed of their past. Now, one can look at it, but what makes people stand up and say, I was a prostitute for 5 years, 15 years, 20 years, I was a thief. I'd never seen it like that. I was a robber. And they can say in church, all the prostitutes here, former prostitutes, stand up, and they will stand up and come to the platform. What kind of gospel? And I said, it must be that the gospel that was shared with them is different from the way we have received the gospel. Because maybe we hadn't dealt with our past well, or maybe we have not been totally delivered. We are not totally delivered, or maybe the pastor is not transparent enough to share from his own experiences. But because of that level of freedom in church, I don't know how to explain, but there was a level of freedom that I saw that I had never seen before. People were really free to talk. And then most of them, because their promised land was intersection of pain and pleasure, it was those areas where they were coming from that they were being sent back by God to go and resolve. And because they were free to talk about it, they could profess solutions. But imagine that if you had people where God was calling them, they're ashamed of it, they can't talk about it. Maybe that's why society is in trouble in many parts of the world.
Wow. That's good. Go ahead, because anyway, maybe we'll just let you continue tomorrow, because because I see that you are really getting to that topic, and that is not the end of it for you. So maybe we'll just continue tomorrow. And I want to thank everybody that has been here with us. I'm sure you have been carried away by this program, just as I myself have been. And let's listen to Pastor John tomorrow. God bless. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day with Pastor Sunday and my guest here, Pastor John. So I cut you short yesterday, and I'm sorry for that, but you didn't finish your thought.
Yes. Yesterday I was talking about people's ability to talk about where they were coming from, their failures, their past, with freedom,
turn it into a platform.
And turn it into a platform. One of the observations I made was that Pastor Sunday, as a leader, the way he discipled the people, it was not a thing to be ashamed of. It was a thing to be proud of, in the sense of absolute delivery, or delivery that was total. People came out of something and they were able to go back there and to make a difference. And one of the observations I made that is related to this is that I found that Embassy of God Church was a church that was very discipleship based. And this, in fact, I'm surprised I'm just talking about this now. It's one of the strongest observations that I made. The fact that discipleship was not a class at God Embassy. Where I was raised, how I was raised, you say, let's go to discipleship class. So it's a class, it's a 1 hour class. So it's possible that your teacher can teach you now. He can take a class on the fruits of the Spirit, and the person teaching you can be angry as he's taking the class. It's a class. It wasn't a lifestyle. It wasn't a lifestyle. But it amazed me that it was not a class. It was a lifestyle. Discipleship, he was big on discipleship and leadership development. And that's a different topic. I'll talk about leadership separately. But what I mean by discipleship is that for the first time, I saw a church that had a discipleship program that could, from the time you come to church till you become a missionary, in your own area of calling, there was a program that will assist you if you're willing to pay the price and go through the process. In fact, I was even told by some of the church leaders that by the time some people do about 3 levels, they are even good enough to go. Most people don't finish it because it was so thorough. Apart from the fact that maybe for other things, it was so thorough that even the people that didn't finish it were, in a sense, effective in the work they were doing. So can you imagine that I, as a pastor, I left saying that apart from the work God has to do in me and I have to do in myself, that each time I meet a person on the street, I must have a plan. That if God will give me the opportunity to work with this person, that given a few months, or a few years, I could turn him from that man on the street who doesn't know God to a man that is a missionary to his area of calling in God.
Yeah, that's the only way to look at people. Anybody who enters into a church, you have to see him and you have to have a plan already in your mind and in your schedule and your papers, how to turn that person from who he is right now. You must have a plan for him, who you see him becoming.
One of the things that I saw related to that is that and this is kind of funny, I found out that, as a minister of the gospel, as a pastor, sometimes God gives you a great message. Maybe you're preaching. What I observed with you on that trip is that things people talked about as a sermon, you built a model out of it.
Yes, not just a word.
There's teachings on purpose in the body of Christ.
Okay.
Finding your purpose. But I think some people go to a service or a conference and it's preached. It's powerful. Everybody goes home. They buy the tape. But you turned into a model. Like, you need to discover your purpose. So it wasn't as if I had that tape.
Material
manifestation. And so I found that, that the things you did privately in your life had become programs in the church and models. Like, for example, the fasting you did during the early years of the church as crisis had become instituted in the church. Yes. And so there was two fasts annually in the course of the church. And I found that when I started it, I asked so many questions. I went to them, I said, this disciple program, how did you evolve it, and so on and so forth. And they said, these were the early teachings of Pastor Sunday. We took the tape, we transcribed them, and we made it compulsory. And when people come, we say, go and listen to all the tapes.
Flesh.
So it became flesh, and the other thing about discipleship that I learned from him, talking to him, he said that as the church grew and progressed, that the messages that was shared from the pulpit that touched him, that he went on a personal retreat, and that he forced his leaders, one after the other, to do the same thing, that they fleshed out the word, so that it was not a church where it was so much as how much you could speak or how much you could quote. People were making the word of God a lifestyle. And I realized that, wow, this is hard work, but this is the only way to go. And I know yesterday I mentioned a bit about leadership. One of the things he told me then is that the hardest thing, I've mentioned it, but I want to go a little deeper, the way I understood it, that the hardest thing he had to do was to raise leaders. And let me explain to you why this is important to me.
I think I will allow you to explain tomorrow, because leadership is a big topic. And if I give you the time to go forward now, we won't finish it. So I want you to be able to address it fully. And so thank you so very much, our friends, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with Pastor John. Hello, everybody. I'm sure you couldn't wait till today to hear Pastor John. Pastor John, you started talking about leadership. What is it there that really impressed you or touched you with the way leadership is done here?
I came to see leadership as a leader's ability to reproduce himself.
To
reproduce himself.
Reproduce himself.
Which is the key to multiplication of a work, a business, a church, or anything like that. And I found out that Pastor Sunday took time to raise leaders. It was very deliberate. In fact, he said that in the early days, that people say leadership, they do it once a month, once in 3 months, that he taught leadership classes, was it daily or weekly?
Yeah.
He had leadership classes. And he said something, he said because he didn't know who was going to be the best leader, that he call everybody to the class.
The church.
And just kept teaching them. And the people, basically, the leaders themselves evolved over time. But what I liked is that he said he poured himself into them, that all that he knew, he poured into them. And he said at some point in the course of this work, when the central church had been a number of thousands of people, he said that one day God spoke to him and said, that you're not yet great in my sight until you have raised people that are able to do what you're doing. So he started the branching out of the church and gave members to some of the leaders, and they started churches. And he said that you're not really a great leader until people can go to those same churches and don't feel they're missing you because they're not in the central church. That if they are going to be running to you, you're not a great leader at all. So it gave me a new understanding and definition of leadership, that a leader, one of his most important assignments, apart from his devotion to God, apart from relationship with his family, is that he must be able to pay the price to multiply himself by spending quality time to pour into his people those things that God was pouring into him. And I saw this demonstrated in church. And the leaders were not throwing their weights around. You see, when I first visited, I walked into the church, I couldn't tell who was this or that. Very difficult. In many places where I come from, I joke sometimes, and I say it with the highest levels of respect, that if I'm in a church, even if my eyes were closed, I'm in a church. When the pastor walks in, I can tell.
Your eyes are open.
Even because but it sounds funny, but to see Christ-like leadership, where the leaders, I didn't know them because of the way they walked, because of the way they were trying to imitate the pastor, but because people were basically trying the best that they can to be able to demonstrate Christ. I mean, the simplicity I saw on that trip, I've never forgotten. The fact that you walk in, I work with many people, I interviewed many people. I didn't see people throwing their weight around, look, I'm the next to the pastor, don't you know who I am, and the emphasis was not on preaching ability, the ability to communicate the gospel, as so much as people trying to live out the gospel, the results, and so on and so forth. And these were my personal experiences, and it had a huge, huge impact on me, that a leader must be willing to pay the price. And that leads me to the last thing, which I'll probably talk about partially now, maybe tomorrow, because I then asked him a question. It was one of the questions on my. I said, what does it take for God to trust you with the things He's trusted you with? Or how is God able to use you the way He's using you? Your family and the church, the way I saw it. I can't explain everything. You need to come to Ukraine to see. And those who have been here can understand what I'm saying, but I'm limited with words, basically. I was so enamored with what I saw. When I went to my people in church were saying, is the only Ukraine we're going to eat in this church? Didn't you know God before you went to Ukraine? I mean, it was an issue. I've not even fully recovered from. But it had just the kind of impact it had on me, But I asked him, and he gave me a list of things. He shared a list of things. He said that the man that will carry revival must have these qualities in them. And I think I would like to probably, maybe tomorrow, mention some of those things. And if he gives me time now, mention one or two.
Yeah, mention one or two now. Yeah.
It's not, the way I'll mention it is not exactly the way it was given to, but the first thing he said, he has to be a dead man. And that part, I'll talk about a little bit, a dead man. I was very impressed. And it's not because I'm here, talking with Pastor Sunday, but, if you ask me about Pastor Sunday, really, between the ministry that he has and the life that he lives, or who he is, I have never been confused. I would choose the life even more than the ministry. Because the quality of his personal life, to work with a man for days, we visit all the time. I'm a pastor, and I know what it means to work with people. You could be irritable, you're tired, you have to learn to be the same. But to work with a man that we have, sometimes the house is full of people, we make mistakes, sometimes we maybe have issues with his personal staff. He is supposed to be the one having issues with us, we are visitors. But to have a man like that, I have to say, how did you become like this? And to know that he's Nigerian originally. The temper of Nigerians, their passion for life, and to become like that, for me, is the work of a lifetime. So he said, a dead man. And I've seen that demonstrated. And I've worked with him in many situations. I remember the first time I met him in 2004 in a service. I was just there. I'd never met him in person. I was just in the service. And he laughed and said, I can't remember the last time I was angry. In the last 5 years, I've not been angry. I said, in the last 5 years? How did that come? And then one day he explained that he took 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and for 3 months, he was meditating on it. He said, what in business, what do you call it in business? It's more like where you picture things. I've forgotten the word.
Yes.
But he said
visualization.
Visualization. He said he looked at so many pictures and what you might call circumstances, and said, what is it that will make him irritable, angry? And he just kept praying through that, walking through that. And I'm sure that he's work in progress, but the level of work that God has done and the quality of his lifestyle is something that I can't forget. Because for me, I'm not so sure. Let me put it the other way. I believe that one of the reasons why God has trusted him with so much, that a movement like this, that a model for the 21st century church has to be in Kyiv, Ukraine. I believe that one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, because I'm not in God's place, is that he's been willing to carry such a move, to be such a person that he's able to allow God to flow through him unhindered. So that's one. Number two,
breaking himself. Right?
Breaking himself. And I want to stay with that topic. It's big for me.
Because we'll continue tomorrow, because that is the basic for everything.
Yes, please.
So you are right. So thank you so much, Pastor John, and thank you, friends, for being with us. It's impossible to quit listening to Pastor John, and we'll continue listening to him tomorrow. God bless now. Hello, everybody. Greetings. Welcome to another day. Well, this is Pastor Sunday here with my guest this week, Pastor John from Lagos, Nigeria. Such deep truth that we'll be hearing from him. You said you want to continue on that first point?
Yes, please. Yes, I'd like to pick up on where we stopped yesterday.
Because basically we're talking about character.
Character.
Of the leader.
Of the leader. I've done some translation per Sunday. I remember coming from Nigeria, and this could be me, so I'm not making a blanket statement, but the second trip I made, I think, I came, I didn't say much. He just looking at me there. He said, if a man makes a promise and doesn't keep it, that man cannot be my friend. He said, you said you're going to do this, and you didn't do it. He said, that's lack of character. He said, don't give me any reason. I don't want to. And he said, every time I tell you something, I do it. It looks small. And this is 4 years after, but for me, it's a big thing in the sense that I realized that it was all about character, about integrity, And the question I kept then asking was, how did you become like this? And what was interesting for me, why I say it's a big topic for me, is that it was not magical. It was not like a miracle. It was a process that he was willing to walk through to say that I want to be a man of God. I want to be. He said to me on that first day, he said, I'm not a pastor to my wife. Yes, she's a member of the church. I'm a senior pastor. He said, I'm her husband, that at home, she's the queen of the house. I let her be. He said, I don't teach my wife anything. That I live it, I demonstrate it. I don't call her teaching Bible study. God said this, God said that. Not because I don't believe in the Bible, but I just live my life in front of her. And I saw that as a process of a man breaking down his life in a way that is usable. Maybe the reason why God allowed that to catch my attention was because I know people will come. I want to see the results in Ukraine. They want to see it in their different societies and nations. And I think God allowed me to say that the man that will carry that work has to be such a man that is willing to go through a process. So character for me was big. And saying a dead man, it simply means that you'll be willing to do anything for the kingdom of God. That's right. You're not ashamed of anything.
That's number one.
Let me end that part, not because it's exhaustive, but so I can talk about a few other ones. One day, we're having a conversation, and this was in Nigeria, and he said to me, that if a member of my church does that, somebody had done something wrong. He said to me, if a member he said, I will go to the other party, and I will kneel down in front of them and accept responsibility for the failure of a member of my church, because I'm their pastor. When they fail, it means I'm the one that has failed. And he said to us, he said that the problem is always with the laborer. He said, never blame the sheep. The sheep is not the issue. You have to work on yourself. Mm-hmm. The way there is failure of harvest, you have to work on yourself. Mm-hmm. And the next point I want to talk about, he said he's a strategic thinker. And he said, and I remember in my notes, my first note, he said, that is very rare. He said, there are not many people in the body of Christ that think strategically, who take time to think through. And now that I've worked with him some more, I think I understand what he was saying then. I don't think I quite understood then. He's taking time to think through things. And he used to say that if I make a statement to you, that I've thought about it, thought about a backup plan, and maybe even a third option if that fails. And today I understand, the fact that if you're going to change your world, you have to be very strategic in your thinking, so that if you're going to carry such a thing, you have to be a strategic thinker. And the other thing that he mentioned was that a person that God will use must be a person that is basically willing to go all the way with God. He has no reservations. He's not a person that is holding back himself. He has to be able to throw himself at God.
It's not 50-50.
He's not 50-50. In fact, he said that he went on a journey with God, a journey of self-discovery. That's how he puts it. A journey where he said, if with God all things are possible, that nothing should be impossible in this place. The other thing that is related is that he said he accepted responsibility for the nation of Ukraine. He said, I'm not just a pastor in Ukraine. He said, don't just see me as a pastor in Ukraine. These are personal experiences. He said, I see myself as a deliverer. That I see myself as a person that has accepted the responsibility for the deliverance of the nation of Ukraine. And that to accept that responsibility meant that I had to go on a journey with God to do whatever it would be necessary to deliver a nation. And I think that was big for me. And there are a few other things. I have to now recollect, those things that hit me really hard. Maybe one or two more. I know dead man, a strategic thinker, to see yourself as a deliverer. The other principle he shared me, he said, I have no secrets. He said, I don't live in the dark. No secret lifestyle or secret things, that I live a transparent life, because that darkness, the devil likes to walk in darkness. So I don't like to share secrets as this, that, and that leads to openness. I found him to be a very open person. In all the things we've done together, working in groups, it was so easy. In fact, when we walk into a room, sometimes we travel together. When we walk into a room, he just puts on all the lights. I like light. Say there's not enough light here. And it was very symbolic. It was symbolic of light, versus darkness. Because if you like to live in the dark, could be there's many dark areas in your life. And the other thing I can think about is I don't know whether this is just the result, but is the magnitude of his heart. Just the way he was willing to share things. On that first visit, there was no meeting they had to the highest level, because I came at a time that was important. They even had the apostolic council, which they didn't have regularly, maybe once or twice a year. It happened on the trip. There was no meeting. He said to me, this meeting is very important. You can't come to this meeting. Every meeting, it was so open. I could, could go anywhere, listen. He brought interpreters, they interpreted for me. And I saw it was a different lifestyle. And I think the conclusions I came to was that when we really get serious about the things of God, that these are the processes that a man, and I'm so sorry that these have been the focus of my discussion, because they were the things that impressed me the more, because I felt that God was showing me the principles behind the results I was seeing, because it was so easy for me to say, how do you get this result? But I did ask those questions, but I think I was led to say, focus, what can you learn from the processes that this man has been through? Transparency, character, willingness to die. And I think for me as a minister of the gospel, that has been the area of greatest challenge, to say, what does it mean for a man to be dead? Nothing is difficult. If you need to go to people to apologize, it shouldn't be a big deal at all. Whatever, if you need to roll on the floor, we come into services, Pastor Sunday is jumping about like a kid. And he said, you know why? I listen to a tape, he said, you know why I jump about like that? He said, I'm just like you. I don't feel like doing it sometimes. But it's because I am a dead man. Because I must be reckless.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I must be reckless, and with my faith in God, I have no reservations, because at some point he said to us that I'm even surprised that I'm still alive, because I thought that with the way things had gone, that I wouldn't even be here to see all these things happen. And that's how he viewed that. He said he exchanged his life for the life of the nation. What a challenge! That the man that will become the father of a nation must exchange his life for the nation. It's no trivial thing at all. Thank you very much.
Amazing. There's nothing to add to Pastor John. When you listen to Pastor John, you never add anything. And the only thing I can say to that is, you want to come and experience Ukraine or Embassy of God, please give us a call or write us email, and we'll be happy to have you. God bless. Thank you, Pastor John.